All right, so we are moving into module 18.1. So this is an 8th grade concept, equations with variables on both sides. So I can solve equations with variables on both sides. And remember, when we say both sides, we mean on the equal sign. So just a reminder, we're going to use inverse operations still, undoing operations that undo each other. And then just reminding you of combining like terms, adding together terms that have equal variables and exponents. So with variables on both sides, we will end up having to combine like terms before we can start using, or before we start solving completely. So we're going to solve the following equation for x. It's x plus 5 equals 3x plus 1. So you can see now we have two sets of variables, and we want to get those variables together. And so what we do is we move the variable with the smaller coefficient first. That way, most likely, our variable will have a positive coefficient. Remember, coefficient is the number in front of the x. It's being multiplied with the x or the variable. So this coefficient of x is 1. Remember, we can just even put the 1 there. And this coefficient of x is 3. So the smaller coefficient is 1, so that's the one I'm going to move. Since I'm just moving it across, and it's what I'm going to do is use an inverse operation, and I'm actually going to move the whole thing. So we're going to subtract 1x. Okay, so now we're moving the variable. Before we were not, and that's because we need to get the variables together before we can start solving. So 1x take away x, 1x is 0. We're left with 5 on this side. And 3x take away 1x is 2x. And then we still have the minus 1 because we didn't do anything with it. Now, once we've combined those variables, you can see I have a two-step equation. So now we're going to use inverse operations again, but this time we're not going to move the variable. I'm going to move this constant. It's minus 1, so I'm going to add 1. 5 plus 1 is 6 equals 2x. And now we have a one step. This is 2 times x, so the inverse is to divide. And 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. And we now have 3 equals x. So just like when we did one-step and two-step equations, we can always check our answer to see if we did it correctly. And all we do is plug this in, but now we plug it in two places. So if I did my check, I'm going to do it over here. I would do 3 plus 5 equals 3 times 3 minus 1. So 3 plus 5 is 8. And then 9 minus 1, we do get 8 equals 8. So good, we got it correct. And we know our answer is right. So you can always check your solutions. So number 2 is a story problem. Andy's rental car charges an initial fee, so that's the starting fee, of $20 plus an additional $30 per day to rent a car. That's Andy's. Buddy's rental charges an initial fee plus an additional $28 per day. The question says, for what number of days is the total cost charged by the companies the same? Remember, same meaning equal, right? Meaning equal. So what we're going to do is write two expressions, one for Andy's and one for Buddy's, and then we're just going to stick an equal sign between them. Okay, because we want to know, when are those two companies the same or equal? So for Andy's, it was an initial fee of $20. So you pay that before the day even starts. So 20 is our constant. Plus, it even tells us it's plus $30 a day, per day. So I'm going to put D for our variable, right? D equaling day. It's going to equal Buddy's Actually, I'm going to change my color. Equal Buddies, and Buddies was an initial fee of $36. So there's our constant plus $28 a day. So I'm going to still move the variable that has this lower coefficient. This coefficient is 30. This one's 28. So I'm going to move this one. So I'm going to go minus 28D minus 28D. So the 20, nothing happened to it. Notice I always put my variables under my variables because I want to make sure that I'm removing the variables and not the constants. The constant didn't change. 20 plus, well, 30 take away 28 is 2D. And it's going to equal 36 because that's what we have left over there. This goes away, 0. Now we have a two-step. So I'm going to move my constant of 20. That's 0. And I'm going to get 2D equals 36, take away 20, 16. And then we're going to get rid of our coefficient. So we're going to divide by 2. And we're going to get that D equals 8. So for what number of days is the total cost charged by the companies the same? The answer is 8 days. There we go. All right, so we have a water tank holds 256 gallons, but is leaking at a rate of 3 gallons per week. A second water tank holds 384 gallons, but is leaking at a rate of 5 gallons per week. After how many weeks will the amount of water in the two tanks be the same? Okay. So we start with our first water tank of 256 gallons, leaking at 3 gallons per week. Okay, so 256. Now this time it's going to be minus 3 gallons per week. And again, I'm going to use W for weeks. And we're minusing because it's leaking it. It's removing the gallons. We're going to set that equal to our second container, 384 gallons, leaking at a rate of 5 gallons per week. Okay, so 384 minus 5W. So we want to know how many weeks. Okay, so we're going to still move the coefficient with a smaller, or the variable with a smaller coefficient. Now remember, minus means negative. So this is negative 3W and this is negative 5W. Remember, with negatives, the larger number is actually smaller. So negative 5 is smaller than negative 3. So we're going to move the negative 5 first. I'm going to add it because that's the inverse of minus. And we're going to get 256 plus 2W. So you can see I got to change that to a positive because I now have positive 2. I'm going to cross this off really quick. That's going to equal what's left, the coefficient, the constant, 384. Now it's a two-step, and so we're going to move the constant first, minus 256 minus 256. So we borrow, and we get 8, 2, 1. Actually, I'm going to write that over here. We get 2W equals, was it 8? Yeah, 128. right? This goes away. Then we're going to divide. We're going to divide by 2. So W will equal 64. And so we'll say 64 weeks. Okay, so we've got next problem says 2 minus 3x equals negative x minus 8. So this would be a good place to maybe pause, try this one out on your own, and then return once you think you have, or push play once you think you have the correct work. So I would first move this negative 3x because that is a smaller coefficient than this negative 1. So I would get 2 equals 2x minus 8 because negative x and positive 3x is 2x. Then I get my two-step. I get to add 8. I get 10 equals 2x, divide by 2, and we get 5 equals x. Notice I also keep my answer the way it was set up here. I never flip it or do any of that. I keep it in the order it always is. I would say, okay, so things to remember. I'm going to type these just because my handwriting's so bad sometimes. So first move. Well, apparently my typing's really bad too. First move the variable with the smaller coefficient. Okay, that's probably the main thing to remember. Move that coefficient, the variable with that smaller coefficient, okay? Then move your constant, okay? So that'll probably be next. Then move the constant. Okay, so here's your independent practice. The first one says to actually write a real world situation that could be modeled by this equation. So what that means is you have to go write a story problem that would make sense for this question. Okay, so you're going to be writing something like the examples that we did in our notes. Okay, then number 4 down below says to just solve for h. Okay, so try to write a real world situation here and then solve for h here. All right, until next time.